My mom's boyfriend was living off my house, tried to seize it and force me to live by his rules, but I taught him a bitter lesson that left him with nothing. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I've been living in my own place for a while now. But let's back up a bit to how this all got started, particularly with my mom, who's 53. A couple of years back, she lost her house. Yeah, not the best turn of events, but the details aren't that important for what I'm about to unload here. Anyway, after she lost her place, it was a no-brainer for me to let her move in with me. I mean, she's my mom, right? Who wouldn't do the same? Plus, I've been doing all right financially. I work in tech, which pays more than enough to keep us comfortable without needing to tighten our belts. So, her living with me was supposed to be temporary, just until she got back on her feet. But life has a funny way of redefining temporary. About a year ago, Mom started dipping her toes back into the dating pool. She met this guy, let's call him R, who's 47 and seemed all right at first. They hit it off pretty well, and 6 months into their relationship they were pretty serious, or as serious as you can get during the times of a global pandemic. When the lockdowns hit and everything started shutting down, R, who was also a divorced dad, was having a tough time with his place and the whole co-parenting gig. One night over dinner, Mom suggested that maybe R and his 2 kids, a 14-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy, could bunk with us until the global mess was sorted. It seemed reasonable enough at the time. His lease was up, and with the world going sideways, it felt right to offer some stability, not just to Mom and her boyfriend, but to 2 kids who were about to face a lot of uncertainties. So, they moved in. I figured, why not? I'd met R enough times to know he wasn't a complete jerk, and while we weren't exactly buddies, we were friendly. His kids were polite, a bit shy, but they seemed to warm up after a few movie nights and shared meals. I thought of it as helping out. Plus, it gave Mom something to focus on besides the past, which was a good thing in my book. Now, my house isn't a mansion, but it's spacious enough. 3 bedrooms, a couple of bathrooms, and a nice backyard that was mostly underused until the kids showed up. I took the master bedroom, Mom had her room, and R and his kids shared the 3rd one. We set up a schedule for chores, cooking, and all that household stuff, trying to make everyone feel like they had their own space and responsibilities. When R and his kids first moved in, it was under the whole banner of making the best out of a bad situation. The world outside was going nuts, and here we were, trying to build a little island of sanity. I won't lie, it felt good being able to help, and honestly, watching my mom smile more these days made any inconvenience seem small. That's the thing about family, or what feels like it at the time. You do what you can to make things work. The first few weeks were, I'd say, surprisingly smooth. R's kids were quiet, probably a mix of being in a new place and the whole situation with the lockdowns. They stuck mostly to their room or sat with us during meals, polite to the point of seeming a bit uneasy. But that's to be expected, right? New house, new man around their mom. It's a lot for anyone, let alone kids. R himself seemed to be making an effort. He'd help out with meals, sometimes taking over the kitchen to cook something he claimed was a specialty. "You got to try my chili," he'd boast. And honestly, it wasn't half bad. He was good about fixing things too. A leaky faucet here, a squeaky door there. I appreciated that. It made me feel like he wasn't just here to ride out the storm but to actually contribute. Mom seemed really taken with how he was around the house, often throwing me a look like, "See, he's a good guy." We set some basic rules early on. It was my house, and while I'm not some dictator, I needed some semblance of order. We agreed on quiet hours, shared responsibilities, and privacy. Basic stuff to keep the peace. R nodded along, adding that he had some rules for his kids, which I totally respected. It's his right as a dad, and I figured if he's laying down some law for his kids, he understood the need for boundaries. The dynamic felt good. I'd finish up my workday and join everyone for dinner. We'd talk about all sorts of things, movies, the crazy state of the world, plans for the weekend. R would often share stories from his past, about places he'd traveled to or jobs he'd had. It was interesting stuff, and it gave depth to the man my mom was with. I started to think maybe this could work out for the long haul, a thought that hadn't really crossed my mind before. However, it wasn't all perfect. There were small signs, little red flags, that I initially brushed off as nothing more than someone getting used to a new living situation. Like how R would insist on rearranging the living room to better suit the flow of the house, or his habit of leaving his tools scattered around after a fix-it job, promising to clean up later, which sometimes meant a couple of days. Small annoyances, sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. Then there was the TV situation. I like to think I'm pretty generous with my stuff, but the TV in the living room was my pride and joy. Latest model, Ultra HD, the works. I didn't mind sharing it, especially for movie nights, but R had a habit of commandeering it for hours, channel surfing endlessly. If his kids wanted to watch something, he'd bark at them about what they could and couldn't watch. It started to rub me the wrong way. This was still my house, after all. But I let it slide. Why? Because Mom was happy. She laughed more, joked more, and there was a light in her eyes that had been missing for a long time. So, I bit my tongue, chalked up my annoyances to sharing space in a stressful time, and kept rolling with the punches. Then came the incident with the garage. I'm a bit of a car guy, always have been. The garage is my sanctuary, a place where I tinker and unwind. One weekend I walked into the garage to find R rearranging my tools and workbench. Just making some space, he said, all casual, like he wasn't turning my private haven upside down. I appreciate the thought, R, but I've got a system here, I told him, trying to keep my cool. He shrugged, a bit too dismissive for my liking, but he stopped what he was doing. Sure thing, but it'd help if things were a bit more organized, right? That comment stuck with me. It was a nudge over a line I wasn't sure I wanted anyone to cross. Looking back, these first impressions were the foundation of what was to come. Small encroachments, tiny tests of boundaries, like he was feeling out how much he could push before I'd push back. I guess, in those early days, I was still seeing things through a lens tinted by my desire to make my mom happy. For now, though, those red flags were just fluttering in the periphery, not quite alarming enough to make a fuss about yet. As the weeks turned into months, the initial gloss of having R and his kids around started to wear off. It wasn't just the small stuff anymore. His influence began creeping into every corner of the house, like some kind of slow-moving floodwater, and just like water, it started causing damage where I least expected it. One of the first major signs that R was taking over more than his share of the space was how he handled the groceries and meals. At first, he'd pitch in occasionally, taking charge of dinner, which everyone appreciated. But gradually, he started making all the decisions about what we ate without asking for any input. If I brought up buying something different, he'd brush it off, saying things like, no, the kids need to eat healthier, or I'm trying to teach them proper eating habits. Noble, sure, but this was still my house, and my fridge he was rearranging. Then there were his rules. What started as reasonable, bedtime and homework rules for his kids, began morphing into house-wide mandates. He posted a schedule on the fridge one morning, complete with chore assignments for everyone, including me. We need to keep the place tidy, he'd say, as if I hadn't been living in a clean house before he showed up. His rules didn't stop at chores either. He started setting limits on how late I could watch TV, suggesting it was disturbing the house's sleeping schedule. The same TV situation escalated when he started insisting we all watch what he wanted. Movie nights became his movie picks, period. If I suggested something else, he'd laugh it off. Maybe next time, he'd say, but next time never seemed to come around. Privacy became another issue. R had this way of just walking into rooms without knocking. My bedroom, which I had always kept off limits, was suddenly on his casual walk-through tour when he felt like it, just checking to see if you need anything, he'd say. But it felt more like he was marking his territory. I found him once looking through my bookshelf, picking up books and flipping through them as if he was in a bookstore. Just curious about what you read, he explained when I raised an eyebrow at him. It was unsettling. It wasn't long before his parenting style started spilling over onto me. I wasn't one of his kids, but you wouldn't know it from how he started talking to me. If I was heading out to see friends, he'd throw in his 2 cents. You sure you should be going out with the virus still around? Or make sure you're back at a decent hour. It was like he forgot who owned the house. The biggest clash came over the use of my home office. I work from home, which R knew. But that didn't stop him from knocking on my door one afternoon with a proposal. I've been thinking, he began. Your office would make a great study room for the kids during the day. You can work in the living room, right? He said it so casually, as if he was doing me a favor by reallocating my workspace. I stared at him, trying to process the audacity. I need the office to work, R. It's set up for my job, which, by the way, pays for this house, I finally responded, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. He looked taken aback, but only momentarily. Well, just a thought, he muttered before walking away. But the seed was planted. It was clear he saw no real boundary to his influence in my home. Talking to Mom about it didn't go as I hoped. When I brought up how R's behavior was becoming a problem, she deflected. He's just trying to help, or he's good with the kids, isn't that what matters? It was frustrating. It seemed like the more he overstepped, the more she justified it. I couldn't tell if she genuinely didn't see the issue or if she was too caught up in the relationship. to admit there might be a problem. The situation kept escalating. It wasn't just about a room or the TV anymore, it was about respect and boundaries, two things that were quickly disappearing in my own home. I found myself retreating more, spending time in my room or out of the house just to avoid confrontation. But I knew this couldn't go on. Something had to give, and soon. I was getting tired of feeling like a guest in my own place, tiptoeing around to avoid stepping on the toes of a guy who shouldn't have been in a position to lay down the law in the first place. As these thoughts brooded, the day-to-day interactions grew tenser. Every comment from R felt like a challenge, every suggestion a decree. I knew a confrontation was inevitable. It was only a matter of time before I'd have to stand up and reclaim my space. But I dreaded the fallout, especially with Mom. Little did I know that confrontation was closer than I thought, and it would start with something as simple as a late-night run. By the time the confrontation came around, I was practically walking on eggshells in my own home. It's weird how that happens, isn't it? One day you're the king of the castle, and the next you're dodging landmines in your living room. Anyway, here's how it all went down. It was a Thursday night, nothing special about it. I'd been cooped up all day, banging out work emails and dealing with back-to-back Zoom calls. By the time evening rolled around, I was more than a little stir-crazy, so I decided to clear my head with a run, a late-night run, which wasn't unusual for me. It's quieter, and honestly, it helps me unwind better than anything. I got back around midnight, sweaty and tired, but feeling a bit more like myself. I headed straight to my room, not wanting to wake anyone, especially not R or his kids. I figured everyone was asleep, and I could slip into bed and deal with tomorrow when it came. Well, tomorrow came a lot sooner than I expected. As soon as I hit the bottom of the stairs the next morning, the atmosphere felt off. It was too quiet, even for our usually subdued household. I shrugged it off and made my way to the kitchen, thinking only of coffee. But before I could even reach the coffee pot, the living room door swung open with a force that nearly took it off its hinges, and there was R, red-faced and obviously pissed about something. He didn't waste any time. "In here, now," he barked, more a command than a request. I paused, coffee forgotten, as I tried to figure out what I could have possibly done to set him off like this. My first thought was maybe something had happened with his kids, or maybe there was some emergency. I stepped into the living room, and he slammed the door behind me. The sound echoed, a sharp clap that made it clear this wasn't going to be a calm discussion. "Was there any need for that?" I asked, more out of confusion than anything else. He just glared at me and then launched into it. "How dare you come into the house at midnight, slamming doors and stomping around? You woke the kids," he accused, his voice rising with every word. I was taken aback, first because I hadn't slammed any doors. I'm not a teenager sneaking in past curfew, and second because he was standing there, in my house, yelling at me like I was some kind of unruly kid. "Look, I came in quietly. If I woke anyone, I didn't mean to. It wasn't that late," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Not that late?" He cut me off, stepping closer, his finger pointed right in my face. "In this house, midnight is unacceptable, and you will respect the rules while you're under this roof." That's when I lost it. The audacity of this guy telling me about rules in my own house, it was just too much. I felt my own anger rising, fast and hot, and I stepped up to him, close enough to see the veins bulging in his neck. "I don't know who you think you are, but you don't get to make rules for me. Not in my house. I'm not one of your kids, R, and you're not my dad. You're just my mom's boyfriend, and that's all you'll ever be," I said, my voice low and steady despite the rage boiling inside. You could have heard a pin drop in the silence that followed. R's face went through a whole range of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it, then opened it again. Finally, he found his words. "I'm trying to run a respectful house here," he said, but his voice had lost some of its fire. "If you can't follow simple decency—" "Decency?" I interrupted, throwing his words back at him. "You call it decent to walk into my home and start laying down the law like you own the place? You think that's respectful to me? To my home?" He didn't have an answer for that. The room felt smaller somehow, the air thick with everything that had been left unsaid for months. Then, from the hallway, my mom appeared, drawn by the shouting. Her face was a mix of worry and confusion. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking from me to R and back again. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down enough to explain, but before I could say anything, R jumped in. "Your son is out of control. He's disrespectful and he doesn't follow any rules." "This is my house, R," I cut him off, turning to face my mom. I've been trying to be accommodating, to be good about all this, but I can't do it anymore. Not with him thinking he can run my life. Mom looked between us, biting her lip in that way she does when she's trying to sort out a mess. Maybe we should all sit down and talk about this, she suggested, ever the peacemaker. But I was past talking. No, Mom, not this time. This isn't something we can just smooth over with a chat. He needs to go. Today. It was bold, maybe too bold, but it was out there now, and with those words hanging in the air, everything changed. The lines were drawn, and it was clear things couldn't go back to how they were. Not now, not after this. After the blowout with R, the house felt like a war zone that had just gone quiet, the kind of quiet that's thick and heavy, like it's holding back a storm. Everyone retreated to their own corners, R and his kids upstairs, me in my room, and Mom, she was caught in the middle, torn between her son and her boyfriend, a place no one ever wants to be. The fallout was immediate. R avoided me like the plague, which was fine by me, but it was Mom's reaction that stung the most. She was giving me the silent treatment, something she hadn't done since I was a teenager. It was clear she wasn't happy about how things went down. You didn't have to kick him out, she said once, her voice low and hurt. He was just trying to help. In his way, I tried to explain my side, about how R's help felt more like a takeover, about the loss of privacy and respect in my own home, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Mom had her view, painted with the brushes of romance and hope, and it seemed no amount of reality could repaint those colors. Meanwhile, R's presence became even more grating. He was technically still living with us, but we were like strangers passing in a house that felt too small all of a sudden. His kids, caught in the crossfire, looked more confused and sad than anything. I felt bad for them. They didn't sign up for any of this. A couple of days after the argument, I came down for breakfast to find R sitting at the kitchen table, looking like he hadn't slept. His kids were there too, picking at their food. The air was tense, uncomfortable. I grabbed a coffee and sat down, ready to keep to myself, but R cleared his throat, obviously gearing up to say something. "I'll be looking for a new place," he finally said, not meeting my eye. "It's clear I've overstayed my welcome." His voice had lost its usual force, now just tired and resigned. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and awkwardness. "Thanks. I think that's for the best." His kids glanced up, worry flickering across their faces. It hit me then. This was their stability being uprooted again, and I felt a pang of guilt. But I also knew this couldn't go on, not like this. The days dragged on, each one a silent testament to the tension in the house. R started packing, slowly at first, then with more urgency as he found a place. Mom said very little during those days, her disappointment heavy in the air. But as the moving day approached, she started to open up a bit, perhaps realizing that this needed to happen, no matter how painful it was. On the day R moved out, it was all business. No tearful goodbyes, no last-minute pleas to stay, just box after box being carried out to a rental van. His kids hugged Mom before they left, a silent promise to keep in touch. R shook my hand, a gesture of peace, or maybe just closure. I couldn't tell. With R and his kids gone, the house felt empty, larger. Mom and I spent the next few days in a quiet standoff. She was hurt, and I knew it. I tried to bridge the gap, suggesting a movie night or a dinner out, but she was distant. It was going to take time, that much was clear. During those quiet days, I reflected a lot on how things had gone so wrong. I wondered if there was something I could have done differently, some way to have avoided the fallout. But every time I replayed the conversations, the confrontations, I came back to the same conclusion. I had to stand up for myself, for my space. Maybe I could have been more diplomatic, sure, but at the end of the day, it was my home, and I couldn't live like a stranger in it. It took a few weeks, but slowly, Mom started coming around. We began talking more, not just about what had happened, but about everything else, work, life, the latest books we'd read. It was like we were rebuilding our relationship, one conversation at a time. One evening, sitting on the back porch, Mom finally brought it up. "I'm sorry," she said, looking out at the garden. "I should have listened to you more. I got caught up in, I don't know, in how I wanted things to be." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mom, I get it. You wanted to be happy, and you thought R was a part of that." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I did, but I forgot that your happiness matters too. I won't make that mistake again." We sat there for a while, just watching the sunset, the weight of the past few weeks lifting bit by bit. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and there were still some rough edges to smooth out, but it felt like a start to something better, something we could both live with. The days following R's departure felt like the slow return of normalcy in our house, or at least what passed for normal after everything that had gone down. The air was lighter, and even though there was still a hint of tension between Mom and me, each day chipped away at the wall that had built up during R's stay. Mom started to get back to her old self, the one I remember before all this mess. She began tackling projects around the house that she'd put off for months, repainting the guest room, fixing up the backyard garden, and even planning some DIY decor projects. It was good to see her taking an interest in the house again, not just as a place she was staying because of bad circumstances, but as a home. We had our heart-to-hearts, usually over dinner or while watching TV in the evenings. It wasn't easy at first. There were a lot of unspoken things hanging between us, but we made an effort. One night, while we were clearing the dishes, she paused and looked at me, a serious look on her face. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," she started, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I know I put you in a tough spot with R, and I didn't see things clearly." I put down the plate I was drying and leaned against the counter. "I know, Mom. It got pretty rough there for a bit." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I let my feelings for him blind me to what he was doing to you, to us. It's not an excuse, but I guess I wanted it to work so badly that I ignored the signs." Hearing her say that, acknowledging the strain R had put on us, felt like a turning point. "It means a lot hearing you say that. I just wanted you to be happy, but not at the cost of our home feeling like a battleground," I said. She reached out and squeezed my arm. "I've made an appointment with a therapist," she said, almost in a whisper. "I think it's time I sorted out some things, figure out why I let that happen." That was a big step for her, and I couldn't help but feel proud. Mom had always been the type to think she could handle everything on her own. Seeing her take this step towards self-care and healing was a relief. "We'll get through this, Mom, together," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a genuine smile spread across her face. The next few weeks were a period of adjustment. With R and his kids gone, the house seemed too quiet at times. But it was a peaceful quiet, the kind that lets you think and breathe without feeling like you're stepping on eggshells. We took the opportunity to redefine our living arrangement. We set new boundaries and expectations, making sure we were both comfortable with the setup. It wasn't just my house, it was our home, and we both needed to feel safe and respected here. One afternoon, I came home to find Mom in the living room, surrounded by photo albums and old family videos. She waved me over, a nostalgic look on her face. "Come here, take a look at this," she beckoned, patting the sofa next to her. We spent hours going through the albums, laughing at old memories and sharing stories from when I was a kid. It was the most connected I'd felt with her in a long time. It was like we were rebuilding our relationship from the ground up, finding our way back to each other after being pulled apart by circumstances and R's influence. As we turned the pages, it struck me how much history we had, how many ups and downs we'd navigated together. This was just another chapter in our story, one that we were closing together. "I'm sorry for everything, really," Mom said as we closed the last album. "But I'm here now, fully, no more distractions." "I appreciate that, Mom, and I'm here too," I replied, squeezing her hand. We had both learned a lot about each other and ourselves through this ordeal, the importance of communication, of setting boundaries, and of supporting each other without condition. In the end, the resolution wasn't just about R leaving or about us getting back to normal. It was about understanding and respecting each other's needs and spaces. It was about growing from the experience, not just moving past it. Life went on, as it does. Mom continued her therapy, and I got back into my routine with work and friends. The house felt like mine again, but more importantly, it felt like ours, mine and Mom's. We were a team, and whatever came next, I knew we'd handle it together, with open hearts and a clear understanding of what made our home a sanctuary for both of us. So, yeah, it was a rough patch, but like all tough times, it offered lessons worth learning. As for me and Mom, we were better than okay. We were stronger, closer, and more in tune with each other than we'd ever been. Here's to new beginnings, right? I'm going to answer some questions. 1. Yes, I was well aware when moving in that it would be my house he was staying in, as he asked me upon moving in about rent and such. However, I'm on a good wage and more than capable of covering household expenses, and did not charge him for staying, as they were only staying until the global issue was over. 2. I'm not kicking my mom out. She needs a therapist, not a change of address. She and I have been casually dating for nearly a year, but started getting serious at the beginning of lockdown. Since it was a growing relationship, my mom suggested we all lock down together so we could all get to know each other better. 3. To those who are curious about my parents' marriage and how it ended, Dad was controlling and manipulative, and he hid it well, just like he hid his girlfriends. There were no fights or divorces. He was my dad, and I do care, but he played away with the wrong woman and paid the ultimate price on her car bonnet. It's sad, but I can't be angry about it.